Hey, kia ora, Helen Brahms here coming to you live from Pikachu in Arizona here, just north of Tucson. And I wanted to come on early today before I forgot what I just saw. So I'll give you a quick recap. Yesterday I mentioned I was going to get up and go and have breakfast outside at the picnic table before the sun got around onto the picnic table. But when I woke up, it was like 55 degrees outside. It was a little on the cool side and there was a cool breeze blowing. So I thought, yeah, no, not going to happen today. And it didn't get above 65 till like around 11 o'clock, by which stage the sun was starting to come onto the picnic table. So we didn't get out there, but did have the windows open, allowing the cool breeze to come in. I just didn't want the cool breeze coming underneath sparkles onto my ankles and feet and that sort of stuff. Yeah, I could have sat out there all wrapped up in blankets, but that would look a little silly. Anyway, so we didn't get to do that because it was cold outside. I did get all my chicken finally cooked. I had it marinating yesterday in powdered ranch with rice vinegar. What did I put in there? Rice vinegar, olive oil, apple cider vinegar, turmeric, ginger, ground mustard, thyme, rosemary, paprika. Trying to think what else is in my seasoning drawer. But it was really, really good. And it took me 2 batches. So I had to saute it all first in the Instant Pot before you pressure cook it. And so it took me almost an hour to get all the sauteing done. And then I did 2 batches in the Instant Pot because it was like 14 to 16 pieces in the thing, when I usually only get like 8 to 10. And I can usually put 8 to 10 in the pot. So we had to end up doing 2 lots. But it turned out really, really good. I decided not to hard boil any eggs because I got so much chicken to get through in the next few days. It's going to keep me in chicken for dinner tonight, tomorrow night, and the next night, and probably the night after that too. And then I started doing all my research on Ketchikan for my book, because I said today was going to be research day, so today was research day. Haven't done any writing so far today, but I just finished watching a documentary. Now, the Ketchikan Visitors Bureau has done this whole series. It's called Ketchikan Stories, and they have done all these different videos on different eras throughout Ketchikan. Like you've got the timber years, you've got the I can't remember the rest of them. Mind blank. This is why I wanted to get on beforehand. But they had one. It was called Ketchikan, A True Frontier. It's like about 45 minutes long. But oh my gosh, it was very, very interesting. And the people that they were interviewing and stuff that were telling the stories are people that were born and raised in Ketchikan, who come from either they're like 5th generation Alaskan or they're 3rd generation Alaskan. And it comes up with what their heritage is and that sort of stuff. And like they had a lot of Japanese came over during the canning season to work in the canneries when they were canning the salmon. And some Japanese ended up deciding we're going to stay here. And like this one guy said, it was about his grandfather and how his grandfather decided he was going to stay there and not go all the way back to Japan. He was just going to stay here and work, and started up like a little grocery store type of thing. And they were talking about that during World War II, there were 5 Japanese families living in Ketchikan, big part of the community and all that sort of stuff. And during World War II, they got told to pack what they could carry and got taken to internment camps down on the continental 48, which upset a whole bunch of people in Ketchikan. They were not happy campers about that. Then you had the Filipino nurses that came over. They interviewed one woman, and this was all, the copyright was done in 2014, so I'm not exactly sure when the videotaping was done, so probably sometime around 2014, because they did all the copyright for 2014, so I'm saying within a year or two of that, they did all of the filming and interviewing of these people. But they had this woman there, and she said she was the 2nd nurse from the Philippines to arrive. It took her 33 hours on a prop plane to get to Ketchikan from the Philippines. And I thought, she's one brave woman. But they were the ones, the Filipino nurses were the ones that started up the nursing, the hospitals and all that sort of stuff in Ketchikan. Then they talked about the Norwegians that came over. It was actually really cool learning about the makeup of the people in Ketchikan, because that's going to help me with my storylines later on. And the Norwegians had overfished the halibut in Norway, so then they came over to Alaska to Ketchikan, where it was, plentiful with salmon and halibut, and they started doing all the fishing there. They established the Lutheran church that was there, and one woman who she was first generation Norwegian Alaskan, and she said that there was always, everything revolved around food for them. Everything, like you said, if you wanted some good food, you went down to the Lutheran church after the Sunday service, and there was just food just laid out there. And the Norwegians settled on Captain's Hill. They created what was called Newtown. And if you're ever in Ketchikan, you've got the ships line up along the wharf. And on this part here, over here, you've got like the historic downtown area where Creek Street is, the Lumberjack Show, that sort of stuff. And then you've got a tunnel that goes through, and then you've got this other part of Ketchikan. Well, that other part of Ketchikan is the Newtown. And the part that's on this side is known as Indian Town. So the new town is where there's a place there called Captain's Hill, which is where the Norwegians settled, and they all had their houses all looked down onto the water where all their fishing boats were, so they could keep an eye on their fishing boats from up on the hills. But then they did have segregation there, which was kind of interesting. So the Indian natives and the minorities who had any different colored skin. If you were white, you were allowed in Newtown. If you were Caucasian, if you were Norwegian or Caucasian, you were allowed into Newtown. If you weren't, you were not allowed through the tunnel, and you had to live in the Indian town side of things. That's where the minorities and those of colored skin lived. So this was a segregation going on in Ketchikan, back in the early 1900s. It was just fascinating. And they talked about Creek Street. Creek Street just fascinates me. They've got all these billboards, they've got all these signs up around Creek Street giving you the history and stuff of it. But one of the guys said that the women who worked on Creek Street were known as ladies of negotiable affection. Ladies of negotiable affection. And they were actually really shrewd businesswomen. All the women that lived on Creek Street owned their own places. So they all owned their own businesses and everything else. So, and they were meant to be very shrewd businesswomen who were property owners as well. And so it was kind of interesting. And then there's this guy, Emery Tobin, who started the campaign to close down Creek Street. And he was eventually, it took him several years, but he was eventually successful. They talked about the Johnston family, who are the trapping and hunting expert guides. And they'll take you up and into the woods and all that to go hunting and trapping and that sort of thing. They talked about J.R. Heckman, who bought the trading company into Ketchikan with all the groceries and the general store and that sort of stuff. They talked about the fish pirates, and what fish pirates were is that at that time they were doing a lot of trapping of the salmon. They would put out these fishing traps for the salmon to be caught in, and then they'd be taken off to the canneries and stuff. But then they'd have these fish pirates that would come in and raid the traps, which I thought was hilarious. And then it was talking about how in 1939 they almost wiped out all the salmon. They overfished it. And then there was a ban on fish traps after that. And then in 1959, Alaska entered the United States, became one of the states. And one of the women there was talking about the time when the logging came in. The logging started back late 1800s, early 1900s. And this comment just absolutely cracked me up. This woman said, and I can't remember the name of the woman that did this, but she said, there were a lot of men in Alaska, the odds were really good, but the goods were really odd. I love that. I love that. And another guy said that those that came in for all the logging and the timber and the lumber and all that sort of stuff were an interesting collection of characters and personalities. And for over 40 years, about 30% of the population of Ketchikan was involved directly in the logging industry. And then the government came along and said, that's it, no more. We're not doing it anymore. And so basically Ketchikan then reinvented itself, and it's done that several times, but they're known to be very good at protecting their history. These people that were telling the stories were just magical people. And I just want to go sit down and listen to more and more stories. I love listening to people who have experienced history, or the stories have passed down through generations, and this is what they were doing. And then they had little outtakes at the end of the thing. This one guy, this one cracked me up as well, because the guy before him had talked about, there was this report about this woman who had been attacked by a fish. Somebody come along with a fish and slapped this woman across the face with a fish, and he likened it to Monty Python. and I'm a huge Monty Python fan, so I know the story. And then the next guy that comes and he said, Ketchikan may not be a fighting town, but we are a town that specializes in recreational conflict. And then he was telling about the fish story as well. So it was very interesting. And I mean, it's a 45-minute segment, and I can't wait to go look at the other ones. They've got several there that cover the timber years. They've got several that cover the cannery years. They've got several that cover what else was in there? Oh, the natives as well. But yeah, this was just an overview of Ketchikan and the type of people that had come along and created this amazing town. And I remember getting off the ship the first time I got off the ship, and and there's my mates Tony and Brett. They are my CP sons. Yes, we actually met them on our very first. Brad and I met them on our very first cruise. Love you guys. On our very first cruise to Alaska, we got to meet them back in September 2009. So I remember getting off the ship and going for a walk around Ketchikan. We actually went up and looked at the totems, and we looked at Eagle Sanctuary that day. But then when I was back there in March of last year, I just got off the bus. The only thing I had organized that day was to go to the lumberjack show and do some axe throwing. So I did that, had a blast, and then I just went for a wander around Ketchikan and was reading all these different plaques that they have all over the place about its history and stuff. But I couldn't find a bookstore where I could go and get like a book on Ketchikan with all the history and stuff in it. So I'm still looking for that. Oh, and then at the little outtakes at the end, they had this woman on there. And like I said, this was done in 2014, around that time. She was born in 1907. And she said, some of the buildings here in Ketchikan are younger than I am. But they're talking about how a lot of the buildings and stuff have been preserved and how they were built in the early 1900s and how they've preserved them over the years. And they actually have quite a lot of, the National Historic Building Trust or whatever it is, where they've got those little stamp or seals of approval on it where you can't alter them without permission or whatever it is. I can't remember what it's called. But so I wanted to get on before I forgot what I just learned, even though I took notes. But it was just fascinating. Listen to this, and I can't wait to get in there and go and hear more stories and everything else, because I got a couple of characters in my book that was going to be Russian, but there was no Russian influence in Ketchikan at that time. So they're now going to become Norwegian, I think. Thinking on that one. But I've definitely got a couple in there that are loggers, lumberjacks. So that's going to be get some of those crazy stories, because they've got like about 6 videos. But if you want to have a look check out some of these videos on Ketchikan. It's called ketchikanstories.com, and this one is called Ketchikan, A True Frontier. And it was just an amazing, amazing video. And now I'm going to go, and it's dinner time. So thank you all for tuning in and watching. Yeah, fish pirates, recreational conflict. Who comes up with these things? But yeah, it's good. So if you want to watch it, go to ketchikanstories.com and you will see all of them. And they're done by the Ketchikan Visitors Bureau to show you it's a part of their preservation of the history of Ketchikan. And you've got actual people who lived there, who were born there, who were raised there, or have first generation, second generation, third generation type of things of living in Ketchikan. So their stories that have been passed down through generations are just fascinating. So Brett is going to be, now Brett is a paramedic, correct me if I'm wrong, in Florida, and he has these most amazing, amazing stories, and he's going to be on the radio next Tuesday about his book. And he just recently got filmed for, what was it, Paranormal 911? Is that what it was? He had this really spooky story. That scared the crap out of me. It was yeah. So you got to let me know when that one's going to air. When Paranormal 911 episode with you on is going to air, because I know you've done the filming for it. And then what's your book called, Brett? You got to let me know what your book is called. And when does it come out, so we can promote it for you? Maybe we'll get you on in Paranormal 911. Yeah, when's that episode airing? And then what's the name of your book that's coming out, so that we can so we can promote that too. Maybe I'll get you on a Facebook Live with you, and we can do an interview on your book. That would be awesome, because Brett's one of my cruise planner sons, along with his husband Tony, and they're just an awesome guys, and Brad and I just love them dearly. We've basically loved them since the day we met them, and have had a great relationship with them over the years, and I'm going to go see them in March. I hope you're ready for me. I'm coming in March. Me and Sparkles, we're coming out to Orlando in March. So we're going to see you guys when we'll be there. So everybody have a super fantastic sparkling evening. I am off to have some chicken and coleslaw, and just enjoy my evening. It's a Jack Ryan evening tonight. And see the Patriot Games or Clear and Present Danger, whichever one was first. All I know is that I've seen Chris Pine, Ben Affleck, and Alec Baldwin as Jack Ryan, and now I'm on to the Harrison Ford ones. So have a super fantastic sparkling evening, and I will catch you guys tomorrow. Hek konara.